President Bola Ahmed Tinubu appoints Hakim Baba Ahmed, Peter Obi's running mate's brother, as SA to vice president. Edo State Deputy Governor Philip Shaibu denied access to Government House. The federal government and the Nigerian Labour Congress meet over planned indefinite strike. And outside of Nigeria, Congo-Brazzaville government denies report of a coup attempt against President Denis Sassou Nguesso. Liberia's opposition leader Joseph Boakai opens bid to unseat President Weah. Tonight in Politics HQ, I will be joined by Senior Advocate of Nigeria and human rights lawyer Mr. Femi Falana. I am Gbenga Aborowa. Stay with us. Politics HQ will be right back. Now, after more than 100 days in office, the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has indicated its direction with regards to policy making, appointments, and economic choices, with different subsidies being activated by the government. There are ongoing issues with the Labour and other groups. Business agreements involving foreign companies and international organizations are also being announced, but events on the home front continue to be a source of discourse. The judiciary and other institutions and power are also raising a voice against political intimidation, while some moves made by the government are being held and condemned almost at equal frequency. Tonight on Politics HQ, I have Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, joining me tonight to discuss the state of the nation. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Femi Falana. It's a pleasure to have you join us tonight on Politics HQ.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you join us. But before I get into my first question, let's take a look at some of the key policies that has been made in the 100+ days of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. He's removed subsidy. He's suspended the chairman of the EFCC and the central bank governor. He's dissolved all federal government parastatals and agencies and institutions and government-owned companies, and has also approved the removal of professional bodies' councils from budget funding. Just a few. We also have the signing of the electricity bill into law, the signing of student loan bill into law, and the appointment of ministers. Now, Mr. Femi Falana, what's your assessment of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's 100 days in office? Is it a signpost of better days ahead, as claimed by the government and its handlers, or do you think otherwise?
Well, I will think very seriously that the handling of the economy, for me, so far leaves much to be desired. The government appears to have embraced the neoliberal policies of Western, or rather, neoliberal policies dictated by the IMF and World Bank. So remove fuel subsidy, remove fuel subsidy without giving a thought to the reverberating effect on the economy, on the people. And that singular act has increased the poverty rate in the country phenomenally. And for me, that is the most important decision so far. I have also had calls to challenge the floating of the naira, which for me runs contrary to Section 16 of the Central Bank Act, which has imposed a duty on the central bank to fix and determine the exchange rate of the naira vis-a-vis other currencies. I've also challenged the regime for the increasing dollarization of the economy. So unless you address the crisis of underdevelopment there's no way you can really address the challenges confronting the government. Now I'm talking of beyond 100 days. I'm talking of beyond 100 days. So unless you look at this area, the number of people that have lost their jobs, the number of people that are losing their jobs, the number of people that are being pushed to the poverty, cocoon. And so unless you look at all this, we can't be talking of, other programs. I mean,
but Mr. Falana, permit me to interrupt you, sir. The government says, these are hard pills, bitter pills we have to swallow for better days ahead, that the whole of Nigeria is making a sacrifice. Do you not see this as a sort of sacrifice that Nigerians have to make for better days ahead?
For the past 40 years, Nigerians have been asked to tighten their belt. The same neo-colonial peripheral capitalist system, has been, implemented by the government. That is the policy of the government, and we've been going through the same route for 40 years or more. And you are told either when it is called Babangida Structural Adjustment Program, or Obasanjo's needs, or Shagari's austerity measures, and so on and so forth, or President Jonathan's transformation agenda. At the end of the day, these are all facets of an economy that is not in the hands of Nigerians, an economy, dictated to or run by forces that are beyond the control of the government. For instance, the IMF and World Bank have run Nigerian economy aground. Yet, those are the two major institutions, lauding, praising the Bola Tinubu administration for removing fuel subsidy, for dollarizing the economy, for devaluing the currency. These are not indications. I mean, these policies do not suggest that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. No.
Now, still talking about these policies, and I want us to zoom in on the fuel subsidy removal, which was a major policy decision of this administration from day one. At Eagle Square, the president declared subsidy is over. And you've been quite vocal about you've been quite vocal about the fuel subsidy removal. Could you help our viewers understand the specific challenges that we've seen from this removal, and why do you believe that the government should allocate a significant portion of the savings to address the issues and on ground with poverty and all of that? And are you satisfied with the attempts so far to mitigate the effects on the average Nigerian? For example, the government has distributed money, 5 billion naira, to states as palliatives for the removal of subsidy. You said, in your words, you said they're diversionary and wasteful.
Now, in the first place, Nigerians are being misinformed with respect to the irresponsibility of the Nigerian ruling class. The irresponsibility of the Nigerian ruling class that has made it impossible for an oil-producing country like our own to refine crude oil and export petroleum products, refine crude oil for domestic consumption. So when you just jump to fuel subsidy, you must find out, how did we get to this level? When did the rain begin to beat us? economically, as it were. You have a ruling class that whose members are unable to run the country efficiently to the extent of having functional refineries. It was because the refineries ain't working that the government had to embark on importing fuel and other petroleum products. And along the way, it was a case of monumental fraud that was recorded. The fuel subsidies scam ought to have been investigated by the government so that those who are responsible for becoming emergency billionaires, because they are profited from our misfortune, should have been brought to book and exposed. Secondly, it is not a crime to subsidize for the people. Every government subsidizes. The Nigerian government does subsidizes the rich. In the last 5 years,
yeah, but they say there's a cartel that has taken advantage of this subsidy.
Have been granted to the rich. So the only one that touches the people is what has been removed by the government. And we're asked to clap for the government. No. Talking of palliatives, the government claimed that with the removal of fuel subsidy, $10 billion will be saved. And since July, the money shared at the end of every month through at the FAC meetings have increased significantly, whereas it was about 640 billion naira. Today is over 900 billion naira. So what is 5 billion? What 5 billion are you talking about? If 300 billion naira has been gained by the three tiers of government, you can't be talking of 5 billion naira or 2 billion naira, and you ask people to clap for you. Is the government investing the excess in job creation, in the manufacturing sector, in industrialization, in the supply of electricity? So what are you talking about?
Now, Mr. Falana, this 5 billion is the same amount to all the 36 states that make up the Federal Republic of Nigeria, regardless of their needs and population. But moving on to other issues, let's look at the judiciary and the state of human rights in Nigeria. You've called for the Department of State Services, the DSS, to expedite investigations involving the suspended chairman of the EFCC, Abdurrashid Bawa, and the suspended CBN Governor, Godwin Emefiele, even though when these individuals were in office, they had a penchant for wanton disregard of court orders. What, in your opinion, is at stake in these cases, and how do you believe swift action by the DSS can address these concerns?
I fight illegal arrests and illegal detention of citizens, including those who engage in illegal detention of citizens when they were in power. I also insist that orders of court be obeyed, including orders made in favor of those who disobeyed the orders of our court, including the Supreme Court, because content by individuals can be dealt with under the law. But when you are talking of disobedience of court orders by the government, it's an invitation to anarchy. And that is why I insist that all Nigerians, including Mrs. Godwin Emefiele and Abdurrashid
Bawa,
be released if there is no evidence to take them to court. And in the case of Mr. Emefiele, an order was made for his release. If the government has not concluded investigation, grant bail to these two individuals who have been held now in detention for close to 3 months. That should not be tolerated under a democratic dispensation. Secondly, the government should, as a matter of urgency, file charges against Mr. Emefiele. And the charges that have been filed, more charges, the charges that have been filed against him, he should be allowed to take his plea before the government can talk about plea bargaining. This is not a case where you can simply arrange or jump to plea bargain without a trial. Serious offenses, bordering on economic sabotage, have been committed. Grave offenses, bordering on even culpable homicide. People were killed. People were killed when we were told that enough money had been given to the banks to give to the public. I have just confirmed that whereas the central bank mopped up 3.5 trillion naira, only 402 billion naira was distributed through the banks. So this led to burning of banks. People were killed in the banks. Many were injured. So you can't just simply say, oh, go away and sin no more.
No, but Mr. Falana, what if there's national security implications involved and the DSS and those in government might not want this to be public knowledge? Do you not think it's the right way to go to, let's skip the steps and get straight and get past the chase and get to the crux of the matter and have a plea bargain deal? Hello, Mr. Falana. Could you kindly unmute your device? I think you accidentally turned it off. Thank you. We can't get your audio.
You cannot talk of secrecy. You cannot talk of secrecy when you are talking of public accountability. So the State Security Service and other agencies that are involved in the investigation of serious economic crimes and crimes against humanity cannot but disclose to the public what has been found in the interest of public accountability.
Now, Mr. Falana, let's move on to electoral issues, especially the 2023 general elections and the post-election issues. Just last week, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, a few weeks ago, gave judgment and did, uphold the election of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And you've raised concerns about intimidation faced by the judiciary during and post the 2023 general elections. Could you share some specific instances that illustrate this issue? Senior Advocate, what implications do these challenges have for the judiciary's independence and the whole electoral process as a whole?
Well, frankly speaking, no one has I've made a case, or no one has really alleged lack of independence on the part of the judiciary, as far as the judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal is concerned. Before now, I tried to impress it on Nigerians, including legal practitioners and judges and legislators, that we need to move away from what I call very backward electoral jurisprudence of our country. I remember in 2017, I compare the electoral jurisprudence of Nigeria and Kenya, and I came to the conclusion that unless we engage in fundamental electoral reforms, we are not going to get it right. As far as I'm concerned, I would think that at the end of the appeals that are likely to be filed in the Supreme Court, which definitely we need to go back to the drawing table to examine the country's electoral laws and see how we can technologize our voting system. Unless we do that, there is no way you are not going to have election petitions. By the way, we have the largest number of election petitions in the world. It shouldn't be so. If we get our elections properly conducted, if we can guarantee the independence of the Independent National Electoral Commission and the state electoral commissions, right? We'll continue to make a mockery of democracy. By the way, the local government elections are the worst elections in Africa. It shouldn't be so. So the point I'm making, therefore, is that, yes, the Court of Appeal or the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal has given its decision. Two of the candidates have indicated their wish to go to the Supreme Court. At the end of the decisions of the Supreme Court, that we can begin to engage in what I would call a meaningful and fundamental review of the electoral laws and electoral jurisprudence of the country. As far as I've read the judgments, the decisions of the Court of Appeal, having regard to the state of the law today, particularly the judgments of the Supreme Court. On many of these issues, it will have been possible for the Court of Appeal to decide otherwise. In the case of Oyetola and Adeleke, it was made clear that INEC is not bound to transmit election results.
And that brings me to this question, Mr. Falana.
Some of the lawyers involved in these cases now were appeared in the Adeleke and Oyetola case. Yes. So dumping of exhibits. There are over 20 cases of the Supreme Court in respect of dumping of evidence on the status of Abuja. You have about 2 decisions of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court to the effect that by virtue of Section 299 of the Constitution, the FCT shall be treated like a state. So when you look at all these decisions, it is my humble opinion that it's only the Supreme Court that can be urged to review its decisions on these matters.
Now, Mr. Falana, you did talk about improvement of INEC and the electoral system in Nigeria. You used the word technologize, and I believe INEC in its move to technologize elections in Nigeria did introduce the IREV portal, and they were taken to court on the basis of not transmitting the presidential election results in real time, as they promised on the IREV portal. Now, Mr. Falana, looking beyond the specific case of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal that has now gone to the Supreme Court because the aggrieved parties have said, you know, they're not satisfied with the Court of Appeal judgment and they will pursue it all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, the Nigerian courts or its judiciary is not, its primary mandate is not to decide who wins elections. It's for INEC. Having said that, how can Nigeria's electoral system be strengthened to minimize the likelihood of contentious disputes and to enhance public confidence in the electoral process?
Now, it is not the duty of the court to determine winners of elections. The electorate will have to decide the winners of elections. So I get disturbed. There were elections held on February 25 this year, presidential election held on February 25 this year. We are not going to be able to determine the actual winner until about November this year. It shouldn't be so. The governorship elections that took place in March, we are not going to know the actual winners until next year. It shouldn't be so. So we must go back to the drawing table and amend our electoral laws in a way that election petitions are determined and concluded before the inauguration of the incoming governments. Secondly, that election petitions are determined only, presidential election petitions are determined only by the Supreme Court, as it is the case in majority of African countries. Now, and we also must again go back to the drawing table. The question of technology. It is possible, as in the case of Kenya, Malawi, and others, to determine election petitions in 14 days by the Supreme Court. And it can only be done if you go full blast, by embracing technology. In other words, accreditation by beavers machines will have to be perfected. Transmission of election results to the central server of INEC will have to be perfected so that after the election, you are only asking for 2 reports. Reports of accreditation and reports of the transmission of results. So you don't need 6 months or 180 days to prove your case. And in fact, we are even urging now, we are campaigning for the implementation of the Waste report, which is to the effect that the onus of proving credible election should shift to INEC. Because you've taken
and not the petitioner. Yeah.
To conduct elections. You are saying you have conducted good elections, come and prove it in court. These are areas we have to look at once the election petitions are concluded.
Now, Mr. Falana, recently we've seen on social media hashtags like all eyes on the judiciary. Nigerians are beginning to have a rethink, some Nigerians, about the independence of the judiciary, and also if the judiciary is actually the last bastion of justice and hope for the common man. What safeguards exist within Nigeria's current legal system to ensure that the judiciary remains independent and insulated from political pressures? Because there is a lot of political pressures on the judiciary with things like, all eyes on the judiciary and so many people, expecting decisions to go their way. Otherwise, the judiciary is compromised, particularly in cases of national importance. What safeguards are there to ensure that the judiciary remains independent of political pressure?
Again, as I said, we must try as much as possible to remove the judiciary from electoral contests. We must conduct good elections so that losers can congratulate the winner within the ambit of bourgeois democracy. If you want me to talk about democracy, I would rather talk about popular democracy. What you call democracy now, I'm afraid it's not my own idea of democracy. But within the ambit of liberal democracy, bourgeois democracy, all the actors must play by the rules. And if you have a case in court where you are alleging electoral malpractice, what you are required to do is to prove your case. Bring the evidence to court that you won the election because this is what you are charged. The result, the return made by INEC, you must go to court and show. I think it was the late Justice Pat actually who made the point that you will need about 250,000 to 300,000 witnesses to impeach the result of a presidential election. We don't have to go that far these days. Once you can technologize the electoral system, and that is what has happened in some other African countries, where you don't take presidential election to Supreme Court alone, you take them to constitutional courts. And that because Nigeria is the only country where for governorship election, you go to 3 stages. Election petition tribunal to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. No, it shouldn't be so. So we are tasking the judiciary. We are taking too many political cases to the judiciary. And whoever loses in this contest will blame the judiciary, even when the lawyers have not done their own work.
I mean, it's
all blame.
Yes, it's human nature. Mr. Falana, let's move on to another issue away from elections and petitions. You made a recent startling claim that Nigeria loses approximately $9 billion worth of out of gold illegally each year, and it's quite alarming. Can you provide some insights into how this illicit trade operates? And what steps do you believe should be taken to curb it effectively? And how can we begin to look beyond oil and also tap into moving away from a model product economy and also reap the benefits of the abundant mineral resources that God has put below the ground for us in Nigeria? Because we have absolutely no business being one of the having one of the highest rates of poverty in the world.
On that occasion, I was only talking of gold. Yes. I didn't talk of lithium. I didn't talk of many other mineral resources that are currently mined by members of the ruling class and their agents, usually on behalf of foreign interests. Of course, you're also aware, just like they're smuggling solid minerals out of the country, these guys are also smuggling crude oil out of the country. So at the end of the day, our country, our people are left poor, while a few people smiling to the banks at the expense of the national economy. And when I said that the economy is not, the government is not in control of the economy, this was the point I was making. For instance, this government, the Bola Tinubu administration, has just decided to meter all our oil terminals. Because currently, every day, it is the oil companies that tell Nigeria what is produced. Yes. The government has no mechanism for knowing what has been produced. Now, the government has now decided to install meters in all our oil terminals. The oil companies, the multinational oil companies, are fighting back. And they have recruited some Nigerians to help them to defeat that policy. A government that is independent should be able to control its resources. For instance, Nigeria is the only oil producing country where oil theft or oil thieves are more powerful than the government. Nigeria is the only oil producing country that exports crude oil and import fuel. So when you look at all these problems, and this is why we are poor.
Yeah, but the government
Because the
is in
resources
dire
of
need
our
of funds.
country
Why do you
are
think
not
this
being controlled
anomaly,
in the interest of Nigerians.
Mr. Falana, why do you think this anomaly has been able to go on for so long unchecked? Because, I mean, listeners watching, I mean, viewers outside Nigeria will think, you know, this is a highly dysfunctional society. How do we, with the amount of intellect and human resources we have in Nigeria, allow this sort of anomaly to go on unchecked for years on end? You just talked about metering, putting meter on the export terminals. This is 50 years plus since oil was discovered in Olobiri and Bayelsa State. Why is it just happening now? And why do we allow such dysfunctional things and anomalies to go on in our country?
Those who are responsible for the high level of criminality in our country are very powerful, and most of the time they control the government, unless Nigerians are prepared to take them, join issues with them, and fight them to a standstill. We're not going to get it right. There can be no basis for the level of poverty in our country, having regards to the enormous resources, enormous endowment. But I mean, ours is the only country where a government can say, oh, fuel is being smuggled out of the country. Therefore, we are going to punish all Nigerians. We're unable to fix our refineries. Therefore, we are going to import fuel from abroad. So these are man-made problems that can be resolved only if Nigerians are prepared to demand public accountability in every segment of our life. We can't go on like this. We are a country as rich as ours becomes a dumping ground for all manners of goods. And where we import all manners of goods, including those ones that can be produced there, so that our young people can be gainfully employed.
Now, finally,
But what we are told,
yes.
please tighten your belt. Tighten your belt. You will smile later. That has been the sing song for 50, 60 years.
The government
Things are
has
getting
to
worse.
definitely do
Things are getting worse.
beyond
Poverty is on the ascendancy.
Yes. Now, finally, as we wrap up conversation, senior advocate, Mr. Falana, as a senior advocate of Nigeria, you have a unique perspective on the legal system. What, in your view, are the most pressing challenges facing the Nigerian legal system today? And do you have any recommendations or insights into potential reforms that could strengthen the rule of law and access to justice in our country?
Well, we operate a neo-colonial legal system. In spite of the fact that the country became independent about 63 years ago, we have not discarded the colonial laws that were imposed on our country. And so we need to put in place a mechanism for decolonizing the legal system. Secondly, we need to mobilize Nigerians to embrace the rule of law as opposed to the rule of rulers. We also must mobilize our people, the trade unions, political parties should engage in serious mobilization of our people to discard bad laws that have no relevance to our people. And of course, we have to pressurize the National Assembly and the houses of assembly of the states to embark on a major review of the existing laws in the country. Many of them are decrees that are simply called acts of parliament. These were laws made by either colonial regimes or military regimes. Laws that have no input of our people. So we must do away with such laws and make laws that will promote prosperity of our people, that will promote the happiness of our people. Thank you.
Now, at that point, I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. We do appreciate your insight and contribution, and also your time for joining us on the program tonight. Thank you so much. We look forward to engaging in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Bye.